and welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm Rebecca Felgate, and today we are talking the top 10 disasters that killed the most people. For this list, we are looking at the worst types of natural disasters, as well as anthropological hazards such as chemical disasters and warfare. Hopefully we can learn something about what is more deadly, natural disasters or man-made disasters. Let's get into this, shall we? In at number 10 we have a tornado. It is the Daltapur to Soltura tornado in 1989 that killed 1,300 people. The deadliest tornado on record was the devastating Daltapur to Soltura tornado that ripped through the two cities of Bangladesh, destroying pretty much everything in its wake. The area had been in drought for 6 months when the tornado struck on the 26th of April 1989. The highest winds reached an insane 217 miles per hour. Every home within a 4-mile radius was destroyed, injuring 12,000 people and killing 1,300. The storm damage racked up a bill of $150 million, with many countries responding quickly to fund the repairs. In at number 9 we have a terror attack, the worst of which has been 9/11 with over 3,000 dead. The most deadly single terror attack to ever take place was the coordinated September 11 attacks that took place in 2001 as Al-Qaeda sought to inflict pain on the United States. As we know, 2 planes hit the World Trade Center buildings in Manhattan, while a further plane crashed into the Pentagon and another into a field. 2,606 people died in the collapse of the World Trade Centers, 92 on American Airlines Flight 11, 65 on United Flight 157, 64 on American Flight 77, and 44 on United Flight 93. A further 125 people died at the Pentagon. In at number 8 we have the worst ever chemical disaster, and that was Chernobyl in 1986 with a death toll of 4,000 plus. Chernobyl was a nuclear disaster on a catastrophic level. On the 26th of April 1986, a reactor at the nuclear power plant of Chernobyl failed a stress test, resulting in the uncontrolled reaction conditions that generated a steam explosion and a graphite fire that released plumes of radioactivity into the air for 9 days as it burned. The town of Pripyat was the most affected and is now officially a no-go area, as is the 30-kilometer radius surrounding the nuclear plant, which is said to continue being radioactive for the next 1,000 years. Initially, the disaster saw the deaths of 31 people from radiation poisoning. As around 500,000 locals were exposed to extreme levels of radiation, it has been predicted that many will go on to develop cancer and that an estimated 4,000 people will die from the cancer directly attributed to the disaster. However, given the reach of the radiation, which spread into the former Soviet Union and parts of Western Europe, some are saying the death toll could be much higher. The worst hurricane on record was the Great Hurricane, a natural disaster that wiped out 22,000 people. The main part of the hurricane took place from the 10th to the 16th of October in 1780. The hurricane initially struck Barbados, moving through St. Lucia and Puerto Rico, and this was all right amid the American Revolution. The storm tore up scores of British and French fleets, as well as killing thousands upon thousands of local people in the Caribbean. It is thought that winds may have exceeded 320 kilometers per hour, but as the storm happened before official measurements began being recorded in 1851, it's hard to know for sure. In at number 6 we have the worst ever landslide recorded, and that was the Haiyuan in 1920. Approximately 200,000 people lost their lives. Like a tsunami, a landslide can happen as a result of an earthquake, causing far more damage than the quake itself. This was very much the situation in Haiyuan in 1920, when a magnitude 7.8 earthquake hit the Chinese county, causing total destruction. The landslide also damaged rivers, adding to the whole catastrophic damage everywhere. Casualties were reported to have been around the 200,000 mark, with many later perishing as a result of aftershocks and also because of the cold. Because of the frequent aftershocks, people were too afraid to build temporary shelters, so many simply died of pneumonia. In at number 5 we have the worst ever recorded tsunami, and that is the one in the Indian Ocean in 2004 that left 280,000 people dead. At 1 AM UTC on Boxing Day 2004, a magnitude 9.3 earthquake took place as tectonic plates in India and Burma collided. This triggered a series of secondary earthquakes and the whole Earth shook 1 centimeter. The epicenter was 100 miles off the coast of Sumatra and sparked a tsunami, which is basically a huge tidal wave caused by the displacement of water. This tsunami was the thing that did the real damage. The death toll of 2,800 was so high as the areas the wave hit along the coastlines of Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India and Thailand are so heavily populated. The majority of people died in the initial flood, being swept up by the strong current and simply drowned. Others suffered in the aftermath, with many starving or contracting diseases. In at number 4 we have the worst ever storm recorded. We have the Bola cyclone of Bangladesh in 1970, which killed up to 500,000 people. So Bangladesh has historically had a really rough ride and is pretty prone to natural disasters. Bola cyclone was one of the most deadly disasters in history, killing up to 500,000 people, of which 100,000 were fishermen. This dealt a huge blow to the country's infrastructure. When the cyclone hit on November the 8th, 1970, offshore islands were obliterated, villages were wiped out, and the majority of the region's crops were destroyed. There is also kind of an interesting political story here too. The country of Bangladesh was born amid this period of crisis. It was previously known as East Pakistan, and the leaders of East Pakistan were heavily criticised for their terrible response to the disaster. This sparked the Bangladesh Liberation War. In at number 3, the worst ever earthquake ever to be recorded, we have the Shanxi province earthquake of 1556, which killed over 830,000 people. Believed to be the deadliest earthquake ever recorded, the Chinese Shanxi province earthquake caused widespread devastation when it struck on the 23rd of January 1556. Taking place almost 500 years ago, we don't know exactly what magnitude it was measured at, but it was estimated to have been around an 8 on the Richter scale. What we do know is that over 800,000 people were recorded to have been killed. From the records, it is said that the quake, which lasted only seconds, leveled mountains, burst rivers, caused widespread flooding, as well as started fires that apparently burned for days. The earthquake, which took place in the Ming Dynasty, is said to have reduced the area's population by a crazy 60%. In at number 2, the worst flood ever recorded, the 1931 China floods, which killed 3 million plus people. The China floods of 1931, also known as the Yellow River Flood, was the deadliest flood or flood group in all of history. After several years of drought, a period of very heavy rain came in July and August 1931. In the July, 9 cyclones hit the region. This caused the Huai River and the Yangtze River to overflow. The Yangtze River is the longest river in Asia and the 3rd longest in the world. As a result of months of torrential downpours, the areas of flooding from the overflow were very fast. The most heavily damaged being the city of Nanjing, which at the time was the capital of China. Millions died from drowning, while many more died from the aftermath: flood damage, starvation, and waterborne diseases. The situation was so desperate at the time that many even resorted to cannibalism to survive. Modern studies estimate that around 3 to 4 million people died in this horrendous disaster. Okay, so we have reached that point. What has been the biggest, most deadly disaster in our history on Earth? Well, I'm actually shocked to say it was a man-made disaster. It was World War II, which killed 80 million people. This is absolutely insane. In the whole history of time, World War II was the biggest killer. Taking place for 6 years between 1939 and 1945, this figure includes the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust enacted by Nazi Germany, as well as 20 million military, including 5 million prisoners of war, and 50 million civilians, including around 20 million from war-related famine. On top of this figure, there are also 5 million people still marked as missing. Interestingly, the country that suffered the heaviest losses was the former Soviet Union, who saw the deaths of 26 million of their citizens. So guys, there are natural disasters, there are man-made disasters, and we now know what is worse. We need to learn from history and not replicate this mass destruction. On a happy note, you can subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10, which doesn't always do doom and gloom videos. Sometimes we do happy ones, so stay tuned for those. I've been Rebecca Felgate. If you liked this video and you found it educational, make sure you give it a good old thumbs up and share it with a friend, and I will see you in another episode of Most Amazing Top 10.